about the OnePlus 15 is actually pretty decent, but it's not really because this phone has super high specs or is extremely cost-effective. It's more that there's a lot of discussion around this phone, especially because people feel that. Compared to the previous generation, it has been downgraded in several areas, but its price is also at that level. Let's look at how it compares to the previous generation and see where the downgrades are. First, I think it's the design. The previous generation's design was pretty distinctive, especially when both phones are black. The previous generations with grain black was unique, including the whole camera module design, right? It also had its own unique OnePlus style. But this year, they've gone back to using the same design as the Find series. With the whole back cover design, you might as well just call it the Find X9 Plus. There's really no need to slap the OnePlus name on it anymore. At least before, you could still get Hasselblad branding, right? Now that's gone too, another downgrade. Personally, I think the exterior design is a downgrade. Of course, that's subjective. Some people might think it doesn't make much difference, right? Now, let's look at something that's a lot more obvious to me. A big step back, the screen. From the previous generation's 2K screen, even though this generation's so-called Pro XDR is technically more advanced than the last one, when you actually play HDR videos, it's obvious that it's just not as good as the previous generation's OnePlus 13. The screen on the OnePlus 13. Among all the models in the previous generation's price range, except for the Honor Magic 7 Porsche design with its dual-layer OLED screen, which could compete with it, none of the others could match it. Among all flagship phones from domestic brands, no phone screen compares to it. That's my evaluation of the previous generation's screen, extremely high. I also asked people around me, and they all felt this screen looks very comfortable. This time, the downgrade is very obvious. So, are there any other aspects? A lot of people would mention the camera, right? Let's first take a look at a comparison of their camera specs. Looking at the OnePlus 10 and 15, I won't cover the basic specs. Obviously, the processor is upgraded. The screen is a bit smaller. For the screen material, as I said earlier, even though it's called the X3, which should be better than the X2 and seems more advanced, honestly, I think there's actually a bit of a downgrade. But for touch response, everyone's hyping up this vibrant display. The refresh rate is 165 Hz versus 120. Honestly, I don't know what difference that makes for me, but maybe a small group of hardcore FPS gamers might notice. For most people, though, I don't think it matters. But the battery capacity, that's something you can actually feel. Still, since all manufacturers are upgrading this, there's not much to say about it, right? Then the charging power is just a little bit higher, since it's a dual-cell battery. And something everyone really cares about, the camera specs. The main rear camera got a bit smaller, going from 1/1.4 to 1/1.56, and the aperture is smaller too. Also, it seems like the glass lens might have been downgraded a little. As for the telephoto lens, its sensor size also changed from 882 to 9N5. Previously, this was used for the ultra-wide angle lens. The JN5 for the ultra-wide has been swapped out for a slightly smaller sensor, going from 2.75 to 2.88. The difference might not be huge, but its field of view changed from 15 to 16. Fortunately, there's not much change with the front camera. That's the only noteworthy thing. Of course, one thing that must be mentioned is that its 5G band support has increased from the previous 15 bands to 21 bands this time, so there's more support. However, the linear motor has clearly been downgraded, and its size is noticeably smaller. This year, it has IP68 dust and water resistance, and now an IP69K rating. With IP66, 68, 69, and 69K, it's fully equipped for shock resistance. Let's look closer. Let's see how it actually performs with sample photos, comparing it to the 13. Is it as strict in real-world performance as it is in specs? Can its algorithms make up for any shortcomings? Let's keep going. On the left is the 13, and on the right is the OnePlus 15. In our sample comparison, let's first look at the ultra-wide angle. The field of view has gotten a bit narrower. One is 15 millimeters, the other is 16 millimeters. Also, the colors aren't exactly the same. On the OnePlus 13 side, it's closer to the actual scene at the time, while the OnePlus 15 is a bit warmer. This is the case with all its lenses. If you look at the enlarged details, the difference isn't that big. The OnePlus 15 sharpens the image a bit more, which I don't think looks as good. It's a bit overdone visually. Now let's look at the main camera. For the main camera, in these scenarios, it defaults to high-resolution mode, which is around 25 or 26 megapixels. So when you zoom in, the clarity is indeed better than the previous generation. But this isn't because of hardware specs. It's purely a matter of software processing. If they wanted to, the previous generation could achieve the same thing. Next, let's look at 2x crop and both side crop. Again, this generation performs a bit better. This has nothing to do with hardware. It's purely about the algorithm and whether they're willing to enable it. Now let's look at 3x and 3.5x zoom. In this scenario, it's also a high-resolution output, so it looks clearer, but the difference is pretty small. Then, their recommended focal lengths are 6x and 7x. Let's take a look at how they perform. It doesn't seem like there's much of a difference, right? Then zoom into 20x. Let's see how they compare at a relatively farther distance. At this point, the OnePlus 15 is just a little bit better, but it's still very limited, yeah? If you zoom in, you can see it's very limited, extremely limited. I even think that in some aspects, the OnePlus 13 might actually look a bit better. Now let's take a look at their high-resolution mode comparison. This is the ultra-wide angle. Yeah, the difference is pretty small. The ultra-wide angle difference is really minimal. Now let's look at the main camera. If you zoom into the same scale, the OnePlus 15 is still a bit better here. I think its algorithm is probably a bit more advanced, and the sharpening is a bit more pronounced, but the clarity is definitely there. You can even clearly read the words on the sign in the distance. Next, let's look at the telephoto high-resolution mode. In high-resolution mode, the OnePlus 15 is still just a little bit better. Now we're indoors, with slightly less light. For the ultra-wide angle, the OnePlus 15 has a bit of a vignette, so the photos it takes are a bit blurry. The overall look isn't as good as the OnePlus 13. As for the main camera, you can see that the difference between the two is relatively small. The OnePlus 15 restores the font more sharply, making it look crisper. Now let's look at 3x and 3.5x zoom. This one is from the OnePlus 13, and the overall look is noticeably better. Then, zooming into 6x and 7x, both have a bit of vignetting. At this point, the OnePlus 15 manages to catch up a bit. Let's look at another shot at night. The lighting isn't great, and both cameras show some vignetting. This is the ultra-wide angle. This is how it looks. Then, when you zoom in with the main camera, this is what you get. The differences aren't very big. Now, let's check out the telephoto lens. Well, that's pretty much it for the photos. You should have a basic impression of the real-life performance now. Overall, when you look at these sample shots, in many scenarios it actually does better than the OnePlus 13, right? Of course, maybe the most important thing is this: whether or not they decide to give it the same algorithms. If they were willing to give all those algorithms to the OnePlus 13, then the OnePlus 13 would probably perform even better than the OnePlus 12. Also, when it comes to the color tone in daytime shots, the OnePlus 15 tends to be just a bit warmer overall. As for the OnePlus 13, it's just a little cooler, closer to a more neutral tone. Now, let's take a look at how they perform when it comes to video recording. Now let's take a look at their video recording specs. The OnePlus 15 supports 4K 120 frames per second, whereas the previous OnePlus 13 doesn't have 4K 120. Don't be misled by the 3.5 here. I initially thought that this tiny telephoto lens on the 3.5, this little J5, could actually support 4K 120, but after testing, I realized it was just a trick. Only the main camera supports 4K. They really put some sneaky thought into this. Now, let's check out their actual 4K 60 frames per second footage. Let's compare them. On the left is the OnePlus 13, on the right the OnePlus 15. The video and photo results are actually reversed. Overall, the OnePlus 13 is just a bit weaker, mainly because of this. But honestly, it doesn't matter. The difference isn't big. Both are clear and decent. The gap between the ultra-wide and main camera is pretty small. Then I switched to the telephoto lens. Both can switch. Speaking of telephoto, I have to mention the OnePlus 15. With slight shakes, it's not as stable as the OnePlus 13. Alright, so that's pretty much how their imaging performance compares. Are you satisfied with the OnePlus 15? Even though the hardware is basically a downgrade across the board compared to the previous generation, I think this time it's relying more on software algorithms, right? It's just barely acceptable, still usable, not to the point where it's unbearable to look at. It's alright, I should say it's okay. It should be able to satisfy at least 95% of people's needs, no problem. After all, the main camera and everything are there, right? Sigh. Even though, compared to others, the hardware here is honestly pretty disappointing, but there's nothing you can do. That's just the reality. They've upgraded everything else around it for you, and the price has dropped, so of course they're going to cut corners somewhere. They can only make some adjustments in areas like the screen or camera, where the costs are relatively high, but that's just something they have to do, right?